Welcome. I'm Dave Diamond, Chair of Programming for the Bethel Temple Men's Club. We're excited to have Joel Malkoff here to talk about his new book, Selling Ethically. After earning a bachelor's degree in business administration from Pace University in New York City, Joel has had a career in sales in various industries for 45 years. Over that time, while generating over $500 million in sales, he has learned that ethical business decision-making isn't just the right thing to do, it's the profitable thing to do. Today, Joel is the president of a successful corporation that manufactures and sells medical and scientific research products worldwide. Joel and his wife, Lynn, both natives of Brooklyn, currently live in Avon. They are Bethel members. This program will be interactive, so we welcome questions throughout. You can use the chat function to ask questions, or just click on the button to raise your hand via reactions at the bottom of your screen. And there'll also be time for questions at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, here's Joel Malkoff.
Dave, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I'm here to answer any Q&A, any questions about ethical decision-making, any questions about my book, my parable. Please just open the forum and we'll just start engaging.
So for right now, we're going to leave you all on mute, just the way I like all of you. Just kidding. But feel free to, like Dave said, raise your hands, raise them on Zoom if you have any questions, or just throw them in the chat. But I'm going to kick us off. So Joel, I was listening to a podcast that you did recently, and the host asked you what you wanted to be when you grew up, when you were a child. And you said that you lived you lived by the moment. So how did we end up as a salesman?
I think sometimes it's just a matter of fate. I graduated Pace University in Manhattan. It was 1973. It was an energy crunch. I wasn't able to work or get a job with a large corporation. So I wound up, I just got married the week after I graduated college. So I wound up taking a job in an automotive dealership. And that's where I kind of learned through mentors, unfortunately, quite unethical, a great departure from my ivory tower type of academia learning in college.
So we are here this evening, obviously, because of this. And I have to say, so when I read, first, before I got my hands on a physical book, thank you very much for sending it to me. I read on Amazon the teaser, and the main character has a heart attack, it seems. And then the teaser ends. And of course, I had to get the book to know, is he okay? But we travel through the journey of this salesman's life and experience. And we're going to talk more about kind of how you decided to land as a parable and that sort of thing. But kind of talk me through, you're a car salesman. How did you learn what you learned? And not necessarily looking back on it, but at the time, how did it feel?
It felt a bit unique. You know, growing up in Brooklyn, New York, you kind of, especially in the neighborhood I grew up in, East Flatbush, you kind of grew up with a little bit of street smart. So, you know, cutting corners, cutting edges, you know, it was kind of something you were proud of. Yeah, okay. When you were kind of growing up. So all of a sudden I'm in the car industry and people are telling me about bait and switch and how to manipulate and use fear as a way to close. And I'm learning all these different techniques about how to manipulate a buyer so you could make a sale. And it all became kind of, well, that's cute. That's kind of an interesting way of selling. And you kind of look at these mentors as your first real full-time bosses, and you're learning from that. And it doesn't feel wrong. It kind of feels like it's a battle, you know, it's a seller-buyer battle, and you're supposed to win that battle. So, you know, here's all your weapons. So that was kind of the start. And then I reached a point that it felt wrong, and it started feeling very unethical. And my book describes it. The book, actually, a parable, it's my life story. And then I kind of went into the commercial lighting business with Westinghouse Electric, figuring big corporation. I got a sales territory. I could build long-term relationships. It's not a one-shot sell like a car sales. And I figured it's a corporation. It's going to be much more ethical. And yet, in the lighting industry, you know, GE, Westinghouse, and Sylvania, they own the market. So everything was price fixed. So it was just another level of unethicalness in the business world.
I got to tell you, reading that section, I'm not going to give away any secrets.
You can.
I don't think. Reading that section where you talk about not wanting, you know, should Mr. King have sold the red lights in the meat section, you know, to the grocery store, made me think twice the next time I went into the grocery store. And I'm looking around. I mean, you must have felt in, like, even in those moments, this is not, come on.
Yeah. I mean, that particular part in the book, when I'm a territory salesperson, I'm in a supermarket, I'm with the store manager, and he wants to put red tinted bulbs in the meat section so the meat looks more red. I acquiesced. You know, he was the buyer. I agreed to it. And then when we walked in the back into the warehouse, and he was using what's called low pressure sodium. It's a yellow light. It's really used for outdoor surveillance in parking lots. And he wanted to put it inside like some other store owners did. I refused to make that sale because those kind of lights would make warehouse workers nauseous. And so even at that point, you know, I was starting to understand a little better right and wrong. And then when I left the commercial lighting business and I went into medical sales, I figured, well, that has to be perfect. You know, you're saving lives, and, you know, as physicians, as nurses, hospitals, what could be better? You know, and there's another whole world in the medical world, you know, the reimbursement, the phony coding, the honorariums, you know, there's just another whole world in that medical industry.
And it seems like that is really where our character reaches a turning point.
Yeah, I have an epiphany, and that's that turning point. And I find my way to God, and I realize there's a higher calling. And although you can be ethical without, I believe, believing in God, truly believing in God brings you to that higher level. And through that search and studying of Torah, then I started understanding really the principles of ethics from a Torah point of view.
Okay, so in the book, our main character goes for a drive after a really difficult conversation, you know, really difficult kind of business realization, and goes for a drive to clear his head, gets lost, and ends up seemingly at a yeshiva or a shul or something.
Yes.
Just describe that for me. I mean, of all the places, if I felt like I got lost, I mean, that feels like a calling, right? But it's also like, you could have easily ended up at a Citgo, and then this could have all gone differently.
Yeah, it's, you know, a very Bichette moment. It was, I was working for a medical company, and then I started my own medical business, and I was selling non-invasive vascular equipment to private office physicians. The manufacturer of the equipment, I was a distributor, promised a product. He wasn't able to deliver a product. I provided loaners, but I had the physicians sign leases on original equipment, which is not what you're supposed to do. You know, when a physician owns equipment, he needs to own it or lease it to bill out on it. So I was part of this thing that was not very good. And there was Medicaid mills in New York, and it was a whole nasty environment. So I wound up getting myself in trouble with the leasing company. So At the time, growing up and living in Brooklyn, driving a red Trans Am, I just kind of got in the car and got lost in Staten Island. And I wound up pulling off the side of the road, and I saw what looked in the distance like a church, but it had a Star of David in the bell tower. So I pulled up, and all these yeshiva students started coming out. What are you doing here? And I said, I'm Jewish on both sides. I want to know more about my religion. And from there, a rabbi came to my house and pretty much showed us. Lynn was always much more religious than I was, but started showing us as a group, as a family, lighting Shabbos candles and just taking the next step. So that was kind of my epiphany. It just, Hashem just guided me to that location. It was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein's Meshiva in Staten Island. So
it was a whole lifestyle change, whole life change, not just a business change.
Yeah, there was. I went to. I had a bar mitzvah, but nothing beyond that. So when I found my way back in my early 30s, I kind of went to Aleph Bet class and learned how to read Hebrew and made contacts with rabbis, started studying Talmud, studying my pashas each week. Pirkei Avos is my go-to book, sayings of our fathers. I have 31 books, different commentaries on Pirkei Avos. So that's what I study.
So you have talked in the book and elsewhere about people who separate business ethics from personal ethics. And I think that for many of us can see it, but it's difficult to understand why or how people are able to do that. Why do you think?
Too many times people will have what they believe is good personal ethics, and then when they go into the workplace, there is no ethics. They just divide it separately, and that's not what it's supposed to be about. Your personal ethics and your business ethics are the same. We believe when you pass on and wind up in heavenly court, the very first question that's asked of you is, were you ethical in business? So, the rabbis would say, wow, that's kind of a strange question. There's so many other questions you can ask that may be more important. But really, business is the perfect testing ground for ethics. So whether you're in business or anything, you're a teacher, and you're still going to interface in some type of business environment. And it's a perfect testing ground because you really can test your what's called a behir point. You kind of point that you decide what's good and bad. That's your testing point. If not in business, it's just a great way to determine at what level you are ethical. And it's a growing process. Like the Talmud says, if you don't add, you subtract. So there is no one thing staying the same. So you have to keep increasing it. And as you increase your ethical, it starts getting harder and harder because you're dealing with more, it's more of a gray field, and it's much more a defined market.
It's interesting because I know, that in the book you talk about how it gets, there's a section, I think, where Noah the scribe is saying, you debated this point. You debated an ethical decision, and should you have even needed to debate it? It seems.
Yeah, that winds up being one of the core questions at the beginning. It's about, should I do a loss lead promotion? I have a new competitor in the medical business that I'm running, and I could squish that competitor because I've been in business for a long time. I have better price points. It's a startup. I could sustain a loss to drive the person out of business. I have done that in the past. So now here's a new competitor, and I'm deciding right now do I want to do that? Is that still feeling good? And through that type of thought process, I wind up, if you will, when I'm taking a shower, I'm feeling a pain in the left arm. I'm not sure if I'm having a heart attack or not. And then all of a sudden, boom, I'm in heavenly court. And there's three angelic judges and my usher, Noah, and a prosecutor. And I kind of go back into time and I visit the places in my past that I have done things ethically and unethically, and I have to defend my life. So
was it daunting, by the way, to imagine that, let alone write about it for everyone to read?
Yeah, it felt very natural. It felt like I was somewhere between this is really happening and it's happening in my mind. And then at the end of the book, I kind of make that decision. And then the question is, should I even have had the need to make that decision, or should I have been at a higher level where I just knew what to do and I didn't have to think about it? So you have that kind of spin in the story too. I wrote the book in 10 months, and it took 10 years to edit it. So it went from 60,000 words to 30,000 words to 15,000 words, back up to 25,000 words, and then having professional editors like our Roberta Bulin, who I hired to proofread the book too. So it was a process, a long process.
It's interesting because I was watching something earlier with Willie Geist on a Sunday Today, and he was interviewing someone, Jake Tapper, who had recently written a book, and he talked about writing for 15 minutes a day. If I can just write 15 minutes a day, that's enough. What drove you to write this book in the first place?
I felt like there's a mission. I feel like the soul comes down to earth, and there's a unique mission that the soul is supposed to fulfill before it goes back into heaven. Most of the time, we don't quite know what our mission is, so we just kind of try to be good. But sometimes your mission, Hashem points to your mission what you may be the weakest at. So if you have a tendency to get angry very quickly, maybe your mission is to overcome that anger. And so I kind of felt my mission was, because of my life going from kind of unethical to ethical, it was to kind of spread ethics. So that was my goal. And that's where it kind of came about. I just woke up one day and I said, that's it. This hole in me that was filled, unethical to ethics, I need to kind of spread that around. So I decided to kind of write the book. I'm in the midst of right now putting together a guidebook for the parable, because I think I always enjoy a parable because I don't like to be spoon-fed something. So if I read a story and I kind of get what the author is saying, it resonates me with a good deal better. But I found that I want to add a supplement to the book, another smaller book that's kind of a guideline, more traditional, still nonfiction, but summaries, clear points. This is ethical. This isn't.
I gotta say, I expected when I got to the end to see a page that said, okay, so in conclusion, in case you didn't get it, here are the things you need to know. I felt like doing the right thing. Yeah.
The little bullets in the front of chapters, the little summaries in the back of chapters, the recaps at the end. I felt like doing all of that, and I just wanted to hold back and just let somebody read the story and just get it. But I do find now that I want to add that extra layer, and it's an opportunity also to give something along with the book. So if you purchase the book, you get the guidebook. I'm not really looking to expect any ROI on the book. The book industry is to say the least, poor compared to medical devices. So there really isn't a lot of money in that industry, but my goal is really to spread ethics either through the book, the website, the audiobook, anything really to get the feeling of it's good to be ethical, because one, it's the right thing to do, but if you don't buy that, it's also the profitable thing to do. Because if you're ethical, you have a good long-term relationship with your buyer seller, and that relationship will be profitable. And it's much easier to sell to someone where there's true trust. You don't have to spend all this extra money looking for new people, because you maintain the customers that you have right now. It's just a pleasant way to do business. And really, from God's point of view, Hashem's point of view, it's to have that peace in the marketplace where a buyer and seller can have mutual trust.
So when you wrote this book, you were the vice president. Now you're the president of the company. Was it difficult to make sure that all of your sales team was on board with your selling philosophies?
Yes, because you could spend it's almost 20 years running this company. You could spend 20 years building a reputation, and it's all gone, in a moment with one bad salesperson. And especially now that the world is a small village, social media, it's over. Literally, it's over if you make just a couple of mistakes, and it's very painful to try to reverse that situation.
So how do you make sure, obviously, I'm sure you run a tight ship, but how have you been able to convince your sales team, aside from now that you own the place?
Not own it, I run it.
You run it. Is it more of the parable style, or is it, no, here's what we're going to do?
It's somewhere in between. It's not, this is what we're going to do. It's getting them to understand this is the way it should be done. And if they don't quite understand it, then this is the way we're doing it. But the goal is to get them to understand it. So it's scalable. They could understand the principle, and then they continue to use it. If I just tell them, do this, don't do that, they're not really learning anything. So the goal is to teach. Because my background started in sales, I get very involved with every sales opportunity. So our CRM, our customer relation management program, our sales lead nurturing, my marketing department, I'm aware of all those individual incidents. So if there's a report that this sale happened to be lost, I want to know why it was lost. Not so much to chastise the salesperson, to see if he did all the right things. Was the follow-up correct? Did he provide enough opportunities? Did he offer enough to the buyer? Did he make some critical mistakes? Did he slander the competitor? What exactly went on? Not so much to fix that sale, which I will still try to do, but it's kind of for the next sale.
So would you describe yourself as a seller on this as you're watching? Are you a salesman on this call? No. How about a buyer? Yes. Not to Joel. Joel would be in sales. Anyone else in sales on this? No. Are you a buyer of services? Okay. Everyone. Are you a buyer of services?
I'm sure everyone must be a buyer.
I'm sure everyone is. I'm taking attendance here. Okay. So I would say, in my own personal experience, it's possible you're in the minority, Joel. Do you feel that way as an ethical salesperson?
No, I feel everyone everywhere is selling something in some mode or another. So it's a philosophy.
But do you feel like others are working as hard to be as ethical as you are?
Yes, I believe they are. To feel different would feel wrong to me. It would feel like I wouldn't be humble enough. If I would accept that fact, then I would feel I would feel too arrogant. I would feel like I'm above, and I don't. I think everyone is trying at their own level. Unfortunately, people have bad experiences through life. So if they were hurt, they're comfortable to hurt someone else. It's kind of like pay back rather than pay forward. So, people's own experiences will justify and rationalize what they may do into the future.
So you talk also in your book about making sure it's not buyer beware, that instead it's seller beware. And how do you think most of us, I know if I'm hiring a drainage contractor, lawn workers, whatever it is, any kind of service that I need, I'm all over Yelp because I feel like it's buyer beware. Yeah, and how do we shift to more of what is a seller beware situation?
Yeah, I think the shifting, caveat venator, let the seller beware. That's where it really starts. So if the seller can be trusted, if the seller has a certain degree of integrity, then the buyer will feel that. And so it's a seller's obligation to provide full disclosure. It's a seller's obligation not to manipulate, not to misrepresent. These are all the things the seller needs to do while still selling in a very positive way. But you still have to have a high degree of honesty and integrity. So the difference between, let's say, selling honestly and being an ethical person, the ethics is going beyond the letter of the law. It's kind of the spirit of the law. So the two things that I look at that makes a person going beyond being honest and being an ethical person is treating people with fairness and kindness. So it's really going beyond. It's not just meeting the sheer letter of the law. Are you really fair? Do you really have the buyer's intent in mind? And can you do business with, we would say in Judaism, loving kindness? You're just caring. And I think when sellers can project that, then buyers start feeling comfortable. Then you have the right buyer-seller relationship. A buyer still needs to have a certain degree of not stealing time, if you will. If you're interested, let's say, in a nice high-end camera, and you can buy it on Amazon, and if you go into the camera shop, it's going to be 30-40% more. But you want to learn more about the features and have somebody teach you about the camera. So you walk into the camera store or you walk into Best Buy, you don't have any real intent to buy there. You're stealing a salesperson's time. So that's an unethical buyer. Okay, the key would be, I would go into a Best Buy and I would say, I can buy this camera 30% less on Amazon. I'm willing to pay you 10% more, 15% more, whatever. I want to learn more about the camera. I prefer to buy local. I prefer the service. But if you can sell it at a price that is 10, 50% close to Amazon, then let me know now and we don't have to speak any further. So, being upfront about it can help. So there's obligations as a buyer too.
So you and Lynn have been married for a few years.
Yeah, next week we know each other 53 years. We married 48. Okay,
so who was the one who makes the calls for a new service provider or someone to come to the house? And who has the conversations trying to suss out, is this seller acting in good faith or not?
I would say it's Lynn. She's surely as sharp as I am, if not better.
Is it hard to trust? Like you're kind of, inside the business. So everything that they could play against you or whatever, or mislead you in whatever way. And I wonder just if it's difficult to try and do business, not as a businessman, but as a person.
Yeah, I think Lynn, both being from Brooklyn, New York, we both have a degree of skepticism, but Lynn has strong gut feelings about things, and she's very sharp. You know, she went to law school. She was in a legal profession, so she really does that, and I don't have any qualms about it. And we talk about everything. So things going on at work, my job, things going on in her life. So there's always that back and forth. But I would say anything to deal with the house, cars, finance, money, it's all her. And she should have been the co-author of the book. And I requested that hundreds of times, but she wouldn't. But there isn't one line that she didn't review and edit. And I think we did a calculation just on word count, and there was 7,000 sentences in the book. So she read and reviewed and commented and critiqued on 7,000 sentences.
Well, and she clearly had a significant role after that awakening, you know, and you came home and talked to her about it.
Yes. Yeah, she's integrated in the book too.
Would you say that business schools need to do more?
Yes. Sales is always very confusing for academia. The closest they get will be, like my degree was a BBA in business. And my specialty was marketing. Sales is just a subcategory of marketing. I don't know of any universities that has a degree in sales, because sales is some mixture between a science and an art. And it's hard for academia to put their hands around that.
I'll just remind everyone that you are welcome to chime in at any time via the chat or a hand wave. Jerry, I thought I saw a hand wave before, but if you wave again, I will know that you have a question. But we have one question in from Michael, or maybe it's a statement and I'll make it a question. Is the customer always right?
If you're looking at it from a point of view of selling the customer is always right. Truly, the customer can clearly be wrong, but there's an approach to autocorrect that customer when he is wrong or she is wrong. But the answer is, from a sales point of view, the customer is always right. So a customer calls up, they're calling up my customer service department, they're complaining about a product. All my customer service reps are trained to pacify and lower the stress level of a customer until the point of view that the customer then can listen. So sometimes, an example, I'll teach my customer service group that if a customer is calling up and he's upset about a product, and he wants to return the product, the best thing you should do right away is to say, no problem, we'll take it back. And then you can almost hear on the other end of the phone where the person takes like a deep breath. You know, now the person who was waiting for a fight, there is no fight. And the person says, well, you're going to do restocking charges. No, we'll take it back. Don't be concerned. And then the person can start listening to what you're saying. And then that person could be toggled back to the sales rep, and the relationship can be fixed, and whatever was wrong can be rectified. And if it can't be rectified, I take back the product. I don't charge restocking. And even a customer who is unhappy with something, and that's a rarity because we really have a very high level of product quality and service. The best a person can say is the product didn't fit right for my application, meaning medical research application. But the company was great. They took it back, no problem. And then I maintain referrals. So it's long-term versus short-term. So yes, the customer is always right. You always have to make that work.
So would you say the purpose of business is to turn a profit or to make friends?
That's interesting. There's traditional and older philosophy in the 40s and 50s that the purpose is to make a profit. People like Bill Gates would say very clearly the purpose of business is to make a profit. His thinking has shifted, but his early thinking of Microsoft, it was very clearly that. Anything going beyond that was not good business. But then you have people like gurus like Milton Friedman in business that said, no, the purpose of business is to build strong relationships. And then from Hashem's point of view, from God's point of view, that is the purpose of business. So from an Asian philosophy, if you do the right thing, the money will follow. And that philosophy is kind of what I believe in.
Do you think that the turn to ethics then has made being more ethical has made business easier or more complicated?
It definitely made it more complicated because I'm not in an isolated box. You know, I have competitors that often do unethical things. So, you know, it's hard to fight someone who's doing unethical things when you're trying to stay at a certain level. So it's more complicated. It's more of a challenge. And I'm always drawn back to the tricks I know that could easily defeat the competitor. And I'm saying, no, I don't want to do that now.
Those are ingrained pretty deeply.
Yes. Yeah. From street smarts in Brooklyn to my earlier careers.
I'm intrigued as I was reading this. So I've been reading a lot of social justice books at the same time. And it makes me think about, you know, I'm sure everyone has seen headlines or read stories about companies where CEOs make a great deal and their employees way down the line don't make a living wage. I would be curious your thoughts on those situations, because it's not sales.
Yeah, it's a little bit tricky. One of the earliest people that kind of set a standard was Ben and Jerry. And both of those founders of the ice cream company, they did a 70-to-1 ratio. So they believed that their salary shouldn't exceed the lowest paid employee of the company at a certain percent. And I think that was just a great way to go. And they set the stage for many other companies doing similar things. When you have that great disparity going on, it becomes difficult, and sometimes the CEOs of companies are really blind to everything else except their own compensation. It's a sad scenario.
I have a question. I won't name the person, but his name starts with Rabbi, who asks if you can speak to the question of the obligations of private businesses to the general community.
The question would be framed as, what should a private business provide to the community?
And what's your responsibility? You're a private business. We don't pay you taxes, but what would you consider, Rabbi, you can shake your head if I'm wrong. What do you think is the responsibility of a private company in the way you conduct your business, or, you know, what have you? What do you think?
I think you need to fit into the community. I think you need to be supportive of the community. You know, years ago, private businesses would sponsor high school sport teams with T-shirts and trophies and things like that. I think today the private business should, in a community, provide local employment. That's the number one thing, you know, providing opportunities for people to work for their own livelihood, and then become active participants in the community. So if it's giving a share of their profits back into the community, if it's being involved with shuls and churches in their support functions, if it's putting on any sort of activities that could be community sponsored, helping food pantries, soup kitchens, you know, all of it. I think that's what a business should do in a private community, become totally involved in a community. I think when you do that, you're doing it for the right reason, and then the money will follow. So people will want to buy from people that support the community. So it's an obligation.
How do you balance that in your company, we'll say, with that idea of, business is for profit, or we have responsibilities to our shareholders? How do you find that balance?
Well, the company's in Litchfield, Torrington. So we're very involved in the Torrington Soup Kitchen, Susan B. Anthony. We're involved in all the activities in Torrington. There's quite a good deal of young people that are challenged in the community, that live in group homes, that we as a company support. This year, I instituted in the company I'm running 3 days off for every employee that does community activity during the workday. So they would get a PTO, they would get personal time off if they did something charitable. The company would pay for that. And I gave 3 days a year for that. So people get personal days off for doing good in the community. And that seemed to be going well. I would say probably, I guess well is relative, probably 25% of the people in my company take advantage of that and do the right thing. But
that's kind of that ripple effect that you've talked about, wanting to make, it's not just, while some of the ripple effect is increase in sales, it can also be different, with the people of your business.
And that's what I feel is working well in the company. So it's little things here or there that kind of make a difference, because we as humans never know if we touch someone, what that person will be, save a life, save the world. So you don't really know your effect. I go for the big picture. I'm trying to spread ethics worldwide. But in consolation, through the difficulty of doing that, I take pleasure in knowing that I made a difference in one person's life. I made that person think a little bit differently, and who knows what comes from that.
If you were to have the opportunity to make one particular person think a little bit differently, say 1973 Joel, what lesson would you want him to know?
I'm not sure it could have happened, because I believe, Hashem guided me to this path. But if there was a way to kind of step back, it would be understanding that my first bosses were unethical, and to understand that much sooner, and to extract myself from that environment.
Marshall, I see you have a question.
Yes. Joel, in my prior life, I was a CPA, and I seem to remember, and it goes back a number of years, when this issue you talked about before, about the ratio of CEO pay to employees. I seem to remember that Congress passed a bill regarding that issue, and put a penalty, an actual tax penalty on companies where the CEO was making more than whatever that limit was. Does that sound familiar? And do you know if that's still going on?
That's interesting. I didn't know there was a federal or a state law in that regard, especially relating to private business or quasi-private business. That might have been a criteria of possibly doing business with the government, winning a contract, a federal contract. I don't know if it's a general rule, But the problem with most federal laws, Marshall, is there's so many ways around it. So you can have everyone from the head of a major corporation to the president of the United States saying, "Oh, okay, I'm not going to take my salary." But from a private business, you give up your salary, and you might have $40 million in stock options. So you
Right.
can kind of get around that compensation end of it in terms of salary by other perks.
I don't remember whether it was a total package, or I really don't. It's quite a while ago now since I retired.
Yeah. I would probably say, Marshall, it had to do with federal business, because I don't know of a law that's general like that. But if you want to do business with the government, they can have certain restrictions like that. And
who do you think is going to have the biggest impact, though? Is it the government? Is it laws? Is it business schools? Is it communities? Is it Yelp?
Who would have the biggest impact in terms of
making an increasingly ethical business world?
From my feeling, it's one-on-one. It's a buyer-seller relationship. So it's when you go into a store and you try to buy something and you just feel comfortable that that person really is looking into your heart, trying to understand what your intent really is. And a true sign of something like that is somebody coming up to you when you describe what you want and say, "I really don't have it. My product just isn't going to fit what you need. But this company has a product that would fit." And you just get blown away by the person's openness and honesty. And the next time you're thinking about something, that will be your go-to person. So you can sacrifice your short-term win for a long-term growth. But I think it's a one-on-one buyer-seller relationship. It starts really right down low in the marketplace. It's not from a high-end government level. It really needs to be grassroots.
Who would you say, another question from one of our friends, is the most important character in your book?
Probably safely, I would say my wife, but
that is a safe answer.
Yeah, I think the protagonist, David King, because it's his life journey and you kind of seeing his transformation. And I think that really is the key, seeing that kind of growth and realizing you're always on an ethical challenge. The challenge continues every day, running the company I'm running right now. There's a half a dozen ethical issues, that I dealt with today. It just keeps going on and on. Anything could be an ethical issue if you're willing to look deep into it. And that's really the key.
Is it most difficult to have the ethical conversations within the company, or the company, how the company does business, or interpersonal things? I mean, does it affect everything?
I believe it affects everything. One of the most difficult is the interpersonal, because when you're dealing with employees, you're dealing with on a certain professional level, but you can't eliminate the character of the person. Most of the people I hired, they're the long-term employees. I like to feel I pay well. I have a kind of New York City mentality, so I'm paying people in Connecticut at a higher rate. And that helps, along with treating people properly, to have long-term employees. So when you have somebody for 10, 15 years, many employees with me with that time frame, you kind of know the person on different levels. And when you know the person on different levels and their character flaws, it's impossible to separate the professional from the personal. So
the business ethics from the personal ethics.
Yeah.
Right. What would you say is the most important takeaway that you would want folks to have after reading your book?
I think I would like them to understand the basics. full disclosure is important. Yiddish saying, about a half lie is kind of a whole lie. So, it's understanding full disclosure. It's not slandering your competition. It's not misrepresenting, manipulating people through fear. All the little tricks that salespeople can do, don't do, and then take it that step further, have the good heart, deal with people with fairness and have loving kindness. And I think when you do that, it's projected, and that allows you to grow the company. And it has been working well for me. And I'm sure it works well for many other companies too. There's many companies that are ethical today, and they're not just small companies, they're large companies. It makes a difference. And when people start feeling better and believing more that they're not going to get hurt by a seller, then it's just a better relationship. So it really is to make the marketplace have more mutual trust.
And any advice for the buyers who aren't full of a lot of trust for the sellers?
Well, I think a buyer still needs to be buyer beware. The ideal is seller beware, but buyers still have to keep their eyes open and make sure they don't get hurt. But I think the buyer still needs to provide enough trust where the salesperson doesn't feel that they're being looked down on, and then they start to have a desire where they want to trick the buyer and make the sale and charge more than they could because it's kind of a game. I think if a buyer can project trust without being naive, then hopefully the seller can feel that back, and there's that good mutual relationship. If the buyer feels that the seller just is unethical, walk away. I'm sure it's not the only butcher on the block. There's other people that you can purchase things from.
Growing up in Alabama, I have to say, I've never said the phrase, I'm sure there's another butcher on the block, but I can feel where that came from deep inside.
Yeah, there was one butcher on my block in Brooklyn, and that's where it came from. That's kind of what you said.
I love it. Well, I don't know if anyone else has a question for Joel this evening, but Joel, I have really enjoyed our conversation, and I appreciate you writing the book.
Thank you, Lydia.
And I hope that you are able to continue teaching more about ethics and get plenty of others on your train.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It was great to talk and great to be here.
Well, thank you so much, Joel, for agreeing to do this program. And thank you so much, Lydia, for leading in the discussion.
She's great.
You guys are a great team together, and thank you to both of you. Joel, as a token of our appreciation, we have a clock. Wait a second. I'm sorry.
We'll give you this book.
I'll tell you what, I'll get that in a second, but just want to let everyone know that if you are interested in this book, you can purchase an autographed copy of the book Selling Ethically. Just check your Bethel emails on how to get the book, or just reach out directly to me. Now, yes. As I was saying, Joel, as a token of our appreciation, we have a clock for you.
Oh, thank you.
It may be hard to read, but it says Bethel Temple Men's Club, and has the right time. And I will touch base with you and get it to you.
Oh, Dave, that's really great. And if anyone wants to purchase the book, I'll also include the audiobook, and any purchase price, all of it, I'll donate it to the shul, of course. So no problem.
Yeah, thank you so much, Joel. And before everyone leaves, I have several brief announcements. The men's club is still looking for softball players for our team that's going to be playing for the next 2-3 months. Games are held Sunday morning at Cigna in Bloomfield, and it's very informal. Both men and women are welcome. You don't have to be a Bethel member. You don't have to be a good player. It's just get out there, have a good time, schmooze with people. It's a nice thing to do on a Sunday morning. If you are interested, contact Michael Bloom. His cell is 860-983-3476. And I have an exciting new activity to announce. We're having an outing to see the Hartford Yard Goats. It's going to be on Sunday, August 22nd, starting at 1 o'clock. The Yard Goats are playing the New Hampshire Fisher Cats, and our seats are in the Hartford Terrace section along the first base side. It's in a shaded semi-private section, and your ticket will give you free access to the Yard Goats Club, which is an air-conditioned indoor section with great views of the game, comfortable seating, and higher-end food and liquor options not available at the general concession stands. But yes, fries, hot dogs, and beer are also available. Yeah, and you can go to this private section when you want to take a break from your field seats. Cost will be $18 a person, but there's no charge for children of paying attendees age 13 and under. So it'll be a great family activity. Again, it's Sunday, August 22nd. Check your Bethel email for details. It should be coming out some point soon, right, Lydia?
I promise, absolutely.
And when you do see it, I urge you to get your tickets as soon as possible because we do have a limited number available. Reminder for people to save the date. Sunday, October 17th, starting at 5 o'clock, is the Men's Club Annual Distinguished Service Award Banquet. We're honoring Bobby and David Clow. All Bethel members will be getting an invitation in early September, but make sure you save the date now. And then one final programming announcement. If you want some exercise and camaraderie, come join our walking group. Every Tuesday, Thursday, 9:15, we meet at the West Hartford Reservoir on Route 44, and we walk about 3.5 miles. And it's followed by coffee in the Bishop's Corner parking lot near Dunkin' Donuts and Panera Bread. And if you're interested, Stu Bernstein is the contact for this. And before I go, if anybody has any ideas for speakers, we're starting to plan our next year, and hopefully we'll have activities in person. I'm being optimistic, but just feel free to reach out to me or anyone from the Men's Club if you have any ideas. If you yourself can speak about something you've done professionally or personally that might be of interest, we get our best ideas from fellow congregants. So again, thank you all for attending, and thanks again to Joel and Lydia. Tom?
Yeah, one thing for any of you softball players, the first game or first practice is this Sunday. So get in touch with Michael Bloom so we can get you guys out there.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Joel and Lydia, and thank you for attending. And
thank you,
Lydia. Good
Lydia.
night. Get home safely, everyone.
Take care.
Good night.
Good night.